We'll get started then on this beautiful day. Call the meeting to order. We did not have an executive session today, so our first bit of business is roll call. Diane, if you will, please.
Yes, Commissioners, if you would please answer when I call your name. Commissioner Robbins.
Here.
Commissioner Briscoe.
Here.
And Commissioner McCauley.
Here.
Let the record show all three commissioners are present today for the commission meeting.
Okay, our advisory committee meetings, the BIAC is this week from tomorrow, the 13th, at the ARF building at 5 o'clock, and the TAC is the same day, same building at 9:30 in the morning, and the Marine Advisory Group is taking the summer off, so they don't meet till September 12th here in this room. And with that, is there any public comment? Has anyone signed up?
We haven't anyone signed up for public comment.
Is there anyone that wanted to make public comment that didn't sign up? Okay, no problem. We'll move on to our consent agenda. Diane, if you will.
Excuse me, a motion to approve consent agenda items A through E.
Commissioner Briscoe, do you have the consent agenda in front of you?
Yes, Commissioner Robbins, I do, and I have no questions regarding the consent agenda.
Thank you. Commissioner McCauley, any questions?
Nope, just want to make a statement about item D, the small works roster. It's nice to see that being used, and thank you to Rob for making that happen. Appreciate that.
I think most of the credit goes to Adam and his team. They're doing great work on that. But yeah,
Thank you, Adam's team. All right, cool. Thank you.
Okay, hearing none, nothing else. All those in favor?
All right.
Aye.
Aye. Let the record show that passes 3-0. Our first action item are action item 1 and 2 that will be voted separately but read together.
A motion to approve a second modification of lease between the Port of Bellingham and the Landings at Colony Wharf, LLC, for premises at C Street adjacent to the Whatcom Waterway. A motion to approve a termination of lease and issuance of a new harbor land lease between the Port of Bellingham and BMI Properties Northwest, LLC, for premises at C Street near the Whatcom Waterway.
Very pleased to be here today to present these action items. We've been working with Colony Wharf and BMI for quite a few months on the leasing details to allow for the expansion of the C Street terminal. And I believe the transactions before you present a win-win situation for both the port and the tenants, and will maximize the commerce and marine trade uses at the C Street terminal. Wanted to introduce the tenants that are here today with the landing at Colony Wharf. We have Amber Olschlager, if you raise your hand. We have Riker Sternhagen. With BMI, we have Rob Rasmussen and Matthew Clark. Thank you for attending. Following my presentation, they'll be available for any questions that you may have. I'm going to first go over a quick background on the leases, show the proposed changes on an animated map, and then summarize the deal points for both transactions, and then answer any questions you may have. This map shows the C Street terminal as it's currently situated. In 2013, the port entered into a 30-year lease with BMI for a 2-acre parcel, and that's shown in red on your map. That lease was issued for use by BMI doing concrete fabrication, barge loading, offloading, and storage activities. In 2014, the port entered into a 10-year lease with Colony Wharf. It included 2 10-year renewal options for a total term of up to 30 years for use as a boat yard, boat storage repair, marine-related cargo activities, and loading and offloading of vessels. This lease included City of Bellingham property, shown in the light blue, that the port managed on behalf of the city, and it was included in the lease on a month-to-month basis to Colony Wharf. The lease also provided Colony Wharf with option areas to lease additional property, and those are shown in the green that I pulled up there. And there's 3 option sites A, B, and C. These leases collectively created a small terminal area in yellow, located at the end of Maple Street on the Whatcom Waterway, for which both tenants have a non-exclusive access right for berthing operations and cargo moorage through their existing leases. The terminal was designed to sort of maximize the area for the leases, but also to provide the necessary access for trucks and barge loading activities onto the terminal. So it was relatively, as you can see, it's relatively small in size as it currently exists. And that was designed with certain parameters for both tenants to be able to function in space together. Over the last few years, this area collectively has seen significant amount of dollars spent on environmental remediation and redevelopment through the Whatcom Waterway and Central Waterfront cleanup areas. The redevelopment included rebuilding the moorage facility, bulkheads, wharves, and streets in the area. During this time, it was identified that there was a desire to expand the C Street terminal area, the area in yellow on your map, in order to increase its effectiveness and use, and in turn increase commerce to the area, and to also reduce the limitations on the site posed by this relatively small area. To accommodate the expanded terminal, the port has been working with BMI on the idea of moving across the C Street area to where I have shown on the map in the dashed red line, and to then expand the C Street terminal into the area I have marked in the yellow line that overlaps onto the existing BMI lease area. This would require Colony Wharf to relinquish their option site C, shown in green within the red dashed area. And both BMI and Colony Wharf would need to agree to revise the non-exclusive use area in the terminal, the yellow, to allow it to expand. During these negotiations, the City of Bellingham decided to take back management of its property, as you know, and the port was in turn obligated to remove that area from the Colony Wharf lease. Colony Wharf, in the discussions, had been wanting to expand their lease area already by incorporating option sites A and B, and they also had interest in incorporating option site C, all the areas in green, into their lease as the city removed their property from port management, and in turn was removed from the Colony Wharf lease. That expanded the Colony Wharf's interest in parcel C, which we'd been talking to BMI about leasing that area. So through discussions with both parties, we were able to come up with a compromise. Colony Wharf would take on the areas I've put in as blue, which is half, roughly a little less than half of the option site C. We'd also, they would also take on a little area on the terminal side, and in exchange they would release, they would let go the remaining portion of the option site C to allow BMI to move across the street into the area, the new area marked red, and relinquish their existing lease and expand the terminal. That's an animation that shows kind of where this is heading and what the documents in front of you would put in place. With that, we created a new map, and just to sort of highlight now what it would look like based on this new map, the area in blue would become the Colony Wharf lease area through the modification of lease. The red area would become the new BMI lease area through issuance of their new lease. And then the C Street terminal would be expanded into the yellow area with both the termination of the BMI lease and the modification, a new BMI lease would incorporate that. Going through the deal points briefly, for Colony Wharf modification of lease. Again, this would incorporate options area A and B, plus a portion of option area C into their lease, while relinquishing the remaining options. So there'd be no remaining option to Colony Wharf, freeing that up for BMI. And then otherwise would modify the legal description and map of premises. The Colony Wharf modification would also update and modify the terms and conditions related to the use and operations of the terminal and incorporate the C Street Terminal user manual into their lease. The authorized use would remain the same for Colony Wharf. Rent on the lease premises, so the area that was in blue, would remain calculated at the same rate that it is now, but adjusted for the new areas. The fees related to the use of the C Street Terminal under the modified Colony Wharf lease would be changed to adjust additional rent. Additional rent is a pro rata share that Colony Wharf would pay for the maintenance costs incurred by the port for the areas of the terminal to maintain the terminal. And then for the use of the C Street Terminal, instead of paying a specified mortgage rate, the modification of the lease would put in place a fee, 20% of gross revenue for Colony Wharf's use of the terminal, and 15% of the gross revenue from the crane for when it's operated on the C Street Terminal area. That was in yellow in the map. This is expected to provide flexibility to Colony Wharf in securing commerce at the site while increasing revenue to the port. And in addition, it makes certain language in the lease, Colony Wharf lease, consistent with the BMI lease and the equipment lease that we issued to the Colony Wharf this last fall. The deal points for BMI, again, this includes the termination of lease and issuance of a new Harborland lease. It would terminate the existing 2-acre lease and issue a new lease across the street for 1.5 acres. Would retain the same termination date. Like the Colony Wharf lease modification, it modifies the area of the C Street Terminal and the terms and conditions related to its use. The BMI's use would be modifying from specifying operations related to the concrete stress bed and change it to more general marine-related fabrication and assembly with use of the C Street Terminal for supporting operations and transportation. The new lease also does not require BMI to construct a concrete stress bed, which was a requirement of the old lease, but it does establish other parameters for tenant improvements on the site, on the new site. Rent for BMI would remain at the same rate, again adjusted for the area, and it would remove BMI's obligation to pay for upgrades to the heavy lift area in the C Street Terminal area. And finally, the lease provides BMI with the option to terminate their lease under certain circumstances. And with that, that's my presentation, and I'm available for answering any questions. But in conclusion, staff is recommending the approval of the Colony Wharf modification lease as action item 1, and the termination of the existing BMI lease and issuance of a new BMI lease in action item 2. Thank you.
In short, we're going to end up with some common area. The port will gain common area on this. Both tenants will lose a little bit of space, but when they use the common area, it'll be charged as a percent.
For BMI, their rate structure for use of the terminal would still be based on the cargo and the cargo mortgage rates and the lay berth mortgage rates because of their activities primarily loading out their materials from their site across C Street Terminal. For Colony Wharf, it would be a 20% charge on their operations.
Thanks for that clarification. Commissioner Briscoe, do you have any questions?
One question. Good presentation, Brady, and thank you for Shirley for all your hard work on this, as well as BMI folks and Colony Wharf. I know it's been a struggle and it's been a long haul to get this done. I'm really glad to see this in front of the commission today, and kudos to everybody for getting it there. Question: the yellow area, that's all common area? Is that on the presentation you sent me? I'm looking at, and I believe it's slide 3 of what you sent me. That is the all common area.
Yeah, that would be part of that would be the C Street Terminal area, correct? So it would be both leases would provide non-exclusive access under terms of the operations manual for use of that yellow area.
Okay, it says approximately 183,530 square feet. That yellow area, correct?
That's correct.
And that's available to other folks to use as well?
It would be available, subject to authorization to other users.
Okay, all right. Very good, thank you. That's all I have. Good job, folks.
Hey, Brady, could you flip back just go back a slide?
I got all this one.
Go to the one that just shows that, there we go, that's fine. So first, definitely want to say thanks to everybody involved, echoing Commissioner Briscoe's comments. I noticed the common area here is fairly small compared to, go ahead and flip and make the new one there, what you just did, compared to that, where it's expanded greatly. So, BMI folks, thank you very, very much for understanding what's going on here. And when the original agreement was made with BMI, there was some former staff that were handling that whole setup, and I think they had a distinct misunderstanding of what the terminal's needs were going to be. So when we wrote the lease, we obviously had you at the water's edge, but you can see the common area was dramatically reduced. And given that, I think if we're going to really support the uses of the barge and the barge terminal, it would make sense to maximize the amount of space closer to the water rather than somewhere further off site. So this new setup is a dramatic change, and I think a dramatic change for the better. And if I'm not mistaken, still allows the landing craft to use the southern end of that area if they need to do that. The original lease, we prevented any landing craft from legitimately using the site because there was, again, a misunderstanding about what landing craft are allowed to do in the state of Washington. So now that there's a better and solid understanding by this commission about what's allowed and what's not allowed, then you can see that this is a much better setup for all the potential operations down there. So just huge thank you to BMI for understanding that and working with the staff and the commission to make the move happen. So I'm certainly hopeful that the new site, a little further off the water, but I do hope it works well for you folks in the future. Landings folks, huge challenges for you, so thanks for all the work that you've done with the staff on that, so I really want to appreciate that. Mention that I appreciate that. So I'd like to call attention to the Site 3 on the right side of the screen. It's 20,000 square feet. So that when the port was managing what's labeled as COB and the Chestnut Street right-of-way, landings at Colony Wharf had a property management agreement for all that property, and now it's reduced to Site 3. But if we notice in Site 3, there's a roadway, I guess you could call it, that goes through that site. But if I'm not mistaken, it's that's 20,000 square feet. It looks like that roadway might take up 4,000 or 5,000 square feet of that site, but it's also the only access sort of through there to what's no longer being managed by Colony Wharf, And I'm a little concerned that they're paying rent on a roadway that they can't really use for their boatyard needs. Can we address that while we're here today?
You're talking about
Right
this-
through there,
this
yeah.
area right here.
So when Lanning's was, managing that whole piece of property, I suppose, they're going to be okay with having that roadway go through there, but now that they're not, they're paying rent for something that they can't even use. So I want to make sure that we address that particular issue for them.
So the modification of lease in front of you today for Colony Wharf does not address that. It would
Right.
provide that as a exclusive use as a part of their lease area.
Right. Frank, did you have a comment on that? No, all right, sorry.
I don't think they're paying rent for the roadway is what I'm saying.
Well, there's the right-of-way here.
Not the right-of-way, it's that access
Not paying rent
through
for.
to the building in the back. Right,
I think you're
that
talking
area right
about
there.
this area.
I mean, clearly there needs to be access through that site, but if it's just access to that other piece of property, I don't think it's fair that the landing should be paying rent for something that they're not even able to use. Anyway, I don't know if we can address that today, but if we can make sure we address it for them in the future, that would be great.
Shirley McFerrin, Real Estate Director. Good afternoon, Commissioners. What I would suggest is if we could approve the transaction presented today, and then we are happy to go back and work with our tenant and determine if there's a reason to adjust that.
Okay, I appreciate that, thanks. Just want to call attention to it. Also, I noticed that on the southern end of, on this screen, the big gray box, that's the Technology Development Center building and former tissue warehouse. And the folks at Colony Wharf are leasing the southern part of the, sort of the yard where there's some trailers packed up in there. I'm very excited about that. I appreciate that there's enough demand for that, but there's no power back there. So at some point, I'd like to visit with the engineering staff and the commission the idea of adding power and then along that building there, and then also working on our stormwater permitting for boatyard uses up in there. So if there's an expansion possibility in that yard, I'd like to take advantage of it, but there's some infrastructure needs we're going to have to set up on that too. Otherwise, I think this looks like I don't even call this a compromise. I hope folks at BMI don't think it's a compromise. I think this looks like a really good layout and sets everybody up for the future pretty good. So definitely want to say thank you.
Yes, I want to applaud both tenants for coming together on this and the staff for making this happen. You can see by all the overlays, it was a pretty complicated project here, and I applaud everyone for getting this together. I think it will be better as well. Commissioner Briscoe, any other comments?
No, I just echo what Commissioner McCauley has said, and you have said as well, too. Good job by everyone involved.
Okay, hearing no other comments, we'll vote on the action item number 1 first.
A motion to approve a second modification of lease between the Port of Bellingham and the Landings at Colony Wharf LLC for premises at C Street adjacent to the Whatcom Waterway.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Let the record show that passes 3-0. And action item number 2, that's part of this.
A motion to approve a termination of lease and issuance of a new harbor land lease between the Port of Bellingham and BMI Properties Northwest LLC for premises at C Street near the Whatcom Waterway.
Okay, hearing no further questions on that. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Let the record show that passes 3-0. Thank you, Brady. Shirley, thank you, both tenants, for the compromising on this and getting it done. I think it'll be a much better plan. With that, I guess we adjourn till 5:30 unless we want to pull something up that's action items of a later date.
If I may, I would, just for the benefit of Commissioner Briscoe, if we could move any of the items 3, 4, and 5 up on the agenda before the 5 o'clock break, And then if we can get through all those and Commissioner Briscoe doesn't need to come back for the 5:30, then I would say two of us can come back for the 5:30 and let him get on with his day.
I don't have,
Thank you for that, Commissioner McCauley. However, I have the time if we need to hold the meeting as written here. I would suggest maybe that we bring forward action item number 5, which is the continued discussion from June 20th, since we already started it on the 20th to put off further discussion until today.
you in favor of tackling that? Oh, okay, we can tackle action item number 5 now, if that's okay with the staff. Okay. I guess it's not an action item, is it, per se?
Well, it was a resolution that would have called for a vote. I did ask to postpone it definitely until today for continued discussion. I think that I've talked with Rob, and I think that the current lease structures that the real estate staff put together cover the issues that I was concerned about. And I don't know about the other two commissioners, but I don't have any reason to continue to ask that the resolution be supported. So I'm willing to rescind that, but it's up to, of course, it's up to the two of you. So
I would be in favor of that as well.
I would ask for clarification, and I thought, or maybe I misunderstood, but I've spoken with our executive director, Fix. The resolution would allow staff to enforce what is in our real estate agreements already with tenants. Am I not clear on that?
No, I think you're clear on that. We have the ability to enforce our leases, without this, with or without this resolution. But I thought the purpose of the resolution was to clarify that campaign signage do indeed fall under unauthorized signage. I've heard the argument that a campaign sign is temporary, and therefore it wouldn't violate the terms of the lease. So that's the one area I would look for some clarification on. But I believe every lease the port has with tenants, and every mortgage agreement we have, and every upland storage agreement we have, which is web lockers, all contain a provision that prohibit the displaying of unauthorized signage. And to me, that's pretty cut and dry. That means no signage is displayed unless it's been approved by the port.
So this would clarify that political signs are included as signs.
I believe it does that. I don't know if it needs that clarification. I don't know if there's if we need legal to weigh in on this. I know when the concern originally came up, that was my concern, that we were being inconsistent, and I'd prefer consistency.
As I do. Go ahead, Commissioner Robbins.
I certainly don't think we need a resolution. The resolution would just ratify what's already there. So I see no reason to do a resolution. I think the question at hand is how we enforce it as it's written. If we do it as we have in the past, or if there's a change to it, and if so, what direction do we give the staff? How do we go about it? So I don't think a resolution is needed. I think it's already there.
And just a brief comment on that. The enforcement is an issue regardless of whether we pass a resolution today or not. Here's how it's worked historically, and I don't see it being much different going forward, is a phone call to the candidate saying, hey, can you take your sign down? It's on port property. If the candidate doesn't comply, we contact the tenant. If the tenant doesn't comply, we've never gotten this far, but if the tenant doesn't comply, then we would have to issue some sort of a notice of default, and they would have a period of time to cure that. I believe that period of time is usually about 60 days, 30 days. Theoretically, the sign could be up for another 30 days. They pull it down, they've cured it. It is a really hard thing to enforce, because all they have to do is pull the sign down. They've now cured the default. Then who's to say they don't put it back up?
I think everyone thinks the port can just go cut it down, but you can't.
No, not on tenant property, no.
And so I kind of see a vicious circle, and I think that's why it's been the way it has been in the past. So I don't see a solution.
Well, yeah, well, I just want to make sure the playing field is, if we've got a playing field about this, that it's the same for everybody. That, you know, it's very clear what the rules are, and that's what I thought the further discussion was about. And I thought the resolution was to clarify that what type of signs weren't allowed to be up. So when I left, signs were still up. I know they were asked to be taken down, but they were right back up. And so I know there was an issue. I've been gone for 2.5 weeks now, and I'm not sure if signs are still up or if they've been taken down. I have no idea.
So, Rob, can you walk through what you just said a minute ago about the 30 days?
Yeah, so we tell a tenant they're in default under their lease, because this is a provision in their lease, and then they have 30 days to cure that, meaning they've got 30 days to respond to us and tell us, you know, no, we're not going to comply with it, or 30 days to fix the problem. And in this case, fixing the problem is taking down the sign.
Well, I certainly don't want to keep adding rule after rule for something, because eventually you're, okay, what's the next sign we're going to say, and what's the next one, and what's the next one, and the list would be incredibly difficult. But maybe the time consideration there, instead of giving 30 days for something like that, that the time would be reduced to, say, 1 or 2 days. Mm-hmm. I would be favorable to that without a separate resolution, so that there's a more rapid compliance.
So the method of doing that would be, as we do new leases, we would put a provision in there that the signage thing only has, you know, a couple days to cure.
Sure.
And that's something we could easily accommodate, I think. I'm looking at Shirley to make sure.
Do all sign leases, or do all leases concerning signs have a 30-day cure period, or are they different? Are some 60, some 90?
I would say 99.9% give a 30-day non-monetary default cleanse, so there'd be an opportunity for 30 days. But we have a lot of leases in play right now that would give the 30 days. As we modify them, like Rob just mentioned, we could add a provision, you know, giving 2 days or 3 days on signage. But the process is when a tenant wants a sign, it comes through real estate, and we submit it to the Architectural Review Committee, and we want to make sure it's hung right, it doesn't have neon pink lighting and that kind of stuff. And then we give our authorization. So here, we would need to have clear direction as to whether we're going to authorize campaign signs, because our leases are very clear that, and it states that all signage must be approved by the lessor. So if a tenant sends a campaign sign to the port and says you're going to approve it, we need to have clear direction.
And I would not approve a campaign sign for a current tenant. It's just, we'd deny that categorically.
The other thing I'd caution the commission is, if you're talking about campaign signs, we can add a clause in the area where there is signs are addressed and leased that specifically addresses campaign signs, and put a very short notice on those. But if you put a short notice on all signs, that may create more of a customer service issue, because somebody puts a sign up and.
But the other side of that argument, Frank, is, you know, we got all these sandwich boards all over, and you give someone 30 days to cure it, and the sandwich board's out there for 29 days, it disappears, and then, you know, 2 months later, it's back up for another 30 days. So I think having that provision for all signs might give us some teeth for some of the other signs that we don't necessarily want.
And I guess what's the solution? If it's 2 days, 30 days, and it doesn't happen, what's the solution? You're certainly not going to find someone's lease in default. And I think that's the problem, whether it's in the web lockers or anywhere, that those signs would be up. Is the port going to go cut them down then? I mean, what's the process?
You can, commissioners, it's within the staff and the commission's sound discretion in a lease when you renew it. It could range from, yes, you could come on and cut them down, which has its own liability issues. It could be a penalty that you could impose as rent due. It could be a default of the lease. It could be, you know, there could be a wide variety of remedies for this violation. It depends what you want. For example, you could say if the sign stays up after notice more than 48 hours, each day it's up, it's $10 or $100 or $10,000. I mean, you can do whatever you want. It is within the commission's sound discretion to give the staff direction on what you have in mind on signage. And I think your executive directors point out to you, it goes beyond just political signs. It's other types of signs that have been creeping into the port. So you could come up with a monetary penalty that would, I would defer to Shirley whether that would be a good idea or not. I just draft the stuff after Shirley figures out what should be said in there, so.
Well, but we get stuck with enforcing it. The staff-
Right, but a monetary penalty is a little easier to enforce than terminating a lease.
Well, unless they don't pay the monetary penalty.
Well, but typically that starts to gain interest and it, you'd set it at I don't know, surely at a number that might cause people concern.
So, Commissioner Briscoe, I asked Rob about putting this together for us for, I think, a relatively specific concern. I definitely, I would like to withdraw my motion on this one because I think that it's opened a bit of a Pandora's box. It's got a different outcome that I think the three of us are seeking. And I think this particular resolution may be something that's just too specific, and maybe there's a conversation we need that's a little bit deeper about signage overall.
I would agree with that. I would agree that singling out one category might not be the best way to go, but I do believe we need to address signs coming up all over the place that maybe are unwarranted, but I think that may be a discussion to have with some of our tenants also at the same time as to what their feelings are about that.
If okay with the commission, I think what I'd like to do going forward then is come up with, Shirley and I and Frank maybe have a brief chat and come up with some language to put in the leases that doesn't necessarily default someone's lease, but gives us some teeth for enforcing signage. Sound good? Sure. Okay,
Yeah, I would agree with that, Rob.
thank you.
Knowing full well it's a heavy-handed port coming down on the tenant. Which I'm not in favor of, but can live with.
Well, just remember, my fellow commissioners, that this action was moved forward by public calls, and we are to respond to that. So I don't feel that the port is coming down heavy-handed. We have been asked to respond to something that is in our leases, and that is what we're doing, our job.
Okay. So no action will be taken on action item 5 then, as I understand it. Do we want to tackle action item 3 or 4? I would certainly be in favor if either of you two would like to.
I would leave that up to Commissioner Robbins and Commissioner McCauley, since I'm the one not sitting there. But whatever you two would like to do is fine with me.
I don't see why not. We got 20 minutes till 5.
So what do you say?
Yeah, let's beat them.
go with it.
These are pretty quick anyway, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you could read action item 3.
Authorize the executive director to reallocate $115,000 from CIP 228-639 account and $5,000 from the CIP account 228-708 to the All-American Marine Manufacturing Facility Project and increase the contingency for the contract with Ram Construction by $120,000 for a total contingency amount of $763,287 and a total authorized contract amount of $9,637,000.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. John Gibson, Project Engineer. In April, you approved a request to increase this project's contingency fund from 6% of the total project value to 7%. We made that request in anticipation of the costs of a series of complicated changes to the building, as well as the agreement to let All-American Marine, our tenant, occupy the building in advance of its completion. Our contracts are clear that the project engineer can negotiate change orders, but only the executive director can approve them, and only when the commission has authorized sufficient funds to pay for them. So a big part of our project management work is anticipating what these costs may be. To that end, before that April meeting, I sat down with the design team and our contractor. We had a series of meetings to go through the pending changes, and we came up with a set of estimates for what those would cost. And that allowed me to appear before you and ask for a $100,000 increase a few months ago so that we would be operating within port policy and moving forward with those changes. In the same anticipatory way, I'm appearing before you today to request that you increase the contingency from 7% to 8% of the total contract price. And we are hopeful that our COP change order proposal review process, as well as our negotiations, will allow us to use less than that, but we want to have the full amount authorized so that we're operating within port policy. I would like to remind the Commission that the port typically awards a 10% contingency with its projects, and sometimes this even goes up to 15 or 20%, depending on the nature of the project. So it's somewhat unusual for us to begin with a 5% contingency on this project. I say that with the benefit of hindsight. We had quite a unique project. It had an advanced pace and quite a number of complexities. So when these issues with the mechanical systems arose, ideally we would be able to stop all work, sit down with our engineers and with the city agencies and say, okay, what's the proper solution to all these issues? And now, contractor, what is the full cost of these? Then once we had that full picture of the solution and the costs, we could say, okay, Commission, we're going to need X number of dollars, and we can proceed accordingly. Unfortunately, in this particular case, we had a very tight timeline. As you recall, our tenant, All-American Marine, had signed contracts to deliver their first boat in the fall of this year so that they could be used during the holiday season. And that has really been a driving factor in us trying to keep this project on schedule. In fact, it also contributed to us allowing All-American to enter the building in advance of it being complete. So my point with all of that is that these changes and these cost estimates have been dynamic and evolutionary in nature. It's not a clear-cut situation where we know exactly how much this widget or this change is going to cost. It had to be worked out with everybody on the team, and that included the architect, the mechanical and electrical engineers, the general contractor, the plumbing and HVAC contractor, the electrical subcontractor, as well as the city's building department, and of course the fire marshal. And those last two have been especially key. I think during my last presentation I touched on the fact that the city had experienced some turnover in some of their inspectors and code compliance officers, and that led to some nuanced changes in the way that they were viewing components of the building. I'm just going to touch on a couple of the components in the building to give you a better sense of what we're dealing with. You might remember this slide from my last presentation. You can see up in the top in sort of a tan color are a set of exhaust fans, and those are used on a day-to-day basis. They're fed by the fans down below in yellow. Those are on the east wall. Those are moving about 2,000 cubic feet per minute each, and there's 4 of them on each side. And then in the middle of the building, you have a series of destratification fans, and those just serve to avoid having a layer of hot air at the top and cold air at the bottom. They just keep the air in circulation. So that's all pretty straightforward. But then on the left in green, you have the makeup air unit fans, and then on the right you have the exhaust fans. And those are only used during a paint spraying operation. So during a typical building project that might last 6 or 9 months, the paint is only going to be happening over two or three days. It's a very minor part of the whole process. But because we were constructing the paint spray area within the main manufacturing area, things quickly got complicated. Now on the left, just for example, this is a paint spray booth that you might see in your typical auto body shop. They would just drive the vehicle in, shut the doors, seal it tight, and it would be a self-contained air delivery and filtration system. We weren't able to do that on this project because of the size of the scale that we were dealing with. The photo on the right shows the Argosy vessel under construction. And for the vast majority of the project, 98% of the time, that's a manufacturing space. You can see all the welders down below, all of the false work holding the boat up, the equipment getting put into place. On the right-hand side, you can see the mezzanine where all the carpenter's shop is. And then the cranes up above, of course, with all of your lights and your fire suppression equipment and so forth. But then those few times a year when they need to paint a vessel, they need to draw a curtain around this, and that curtain will protect all the other equipment and the rest of the building from overspray. So at that time, it transforms into that paint spray area. This was kind of unprecedented. None of our engineers or architects had ever done anything like this. The city had never seen anything like it. Our contractor had never tried something like this. So we were sort of starting from ground zero with the interpretation of the codes and then the actual application of all of these mechanical components. As we go through this, I'd like to encourage you to just keep in mind the general massive scale of this. Down on the left, you can see a garage door, and that's actually sized to allow a semi-truck to pull through it. So you can see by reference that the makeup air unit up above is just huge. Those are both approximately 25,000 cubic feet per minute. So if you can imagine a cube that's 30 feet on each side, it's moving that volume of air every minute. And again, it's only used during that paint spraying operation. So that's supplying the air into the building, and at the same time, this is the exhaust fan. It's expelling the air after it's been filtered. The assembly on the left shows the ventilation ducts coming up from the filtration units. And then up above, you can see those two pipes are about 6 feet in diameter. If you look on the right-hand side, the box in red shows the units on top of the roof. And I'd like you to see how they're actually bigger than that Jeep that's right down below. These are the supply and exhaust fans that I referenced earlier. So they are just used in day-to-day operation of the building, but we found out midway through the project that the city was going to require them to be tied into the fire alarm system so that they wouldn't be supplying fresh oxygen in the case of an emergency event. So that required a great deal of new conduit and wiring to be run, as well as them to be tied into the actual control circuits. This is just a minor item, but these are the destratification fans that I mentioned earlier. There's 4 of these, and those are actually 20 feet in diameter. If you've been inside the new Costco building, they have something similar on their ceiling. So just to get back to what I'm here to request today, we are asking that you increase the contingency by another 1%, or about $120,000. And I want to note that this is going to be funded by a reallocation from 2 related projects. One of them is the Wharf D demolition, which is currently going to take place in conjunction with the construction of the I&J waterway fit-up float for All-American Marine. As I think Adam Fulton has mentioned before, we would like to go ahead and demolish that entire facility, but there's no apparatus in place for banking that overwater coverage. So we only need to demolish as much as necessary for the new fit-up float. And then the other source of funds would be the surplus remaining from the expansion of the Squalcombe boat launch, which was widened to accommodate All Americans boats. Are there any questions from the commission?
Commissioner Briscoe, any questions?
I have none.
Excuse me, on the fans, can you switch back to, go back again, and again, and again, and again. All right, so I'm seeing the paint booth there on the right-hand side. Clearly, it's going to have some sort of curtain drawn around it. Can you go forward?
Sure.
So that, one more, please. Those fans there are sized to match the supply fans?
Correct. Yeah, so you have a pair of the MAU makeup air unit fans, and they're both 25,000 CFM. And then you have a set of exhaust fan EF5s, and they're also 25,000 CFM.
So if, no, I think a person would look at this building and see this airplane-style hangar door or airplane hangar-style door opening and realize that if you just open a door, you don't need the makeup air fans. So did the city request those based on any modeling, or it was just, we have air getting out, therefore we need to stuff air back in?
Well, I think there's a couple of things at play there. I think the biggest thing, as you alluded to, is a set of modeling that was done by the mechanical contractor or the mechanical engineer. And so they have a set of complex calculations that they do that take a look at the dynamics of the air inside that building and how it's going to move through that space and how many air changes you're going to need in a certain amount of time. And as a contractor, you're familiar with all of that. I don't think that they could factor in the open doors because that would require the building to be subject to the outside weather during the inclement weather. So I'm just picturing a cold February morning when you've got wind coming in sideways. I don't think the tenant is going to want to have all of their vessels being constructed in Bay 3 and their expensive welding equipment subject to those conditions.
So to answer Commissioner McCauley's question, the open door isn't even in the numbers, in the calculations.
That's right. It's not part of the equation.
You're assuming it's shut all the time.
It assumes a closed envelope.
Thank you.
Is the makeup air heated then, or brought it to some other temperature?
Oh, that's a great question. Yeah, you're right. It is brought up to the right temperature. One of the things that we did with this is we wanted to make it as simple as possible for the tenant to operate. So even though you've got all of these different components synchronized and taking a certain sequence and communicating with the fire alarm panel, we were able to set it up so that they only have two switches. One switch goes from winter to summer, and the other switch goes from on to off. And so they can come in and say, yep, it's winter, we're going to paint, switch it to winter, turn it on, it starts the soft start process, and then it warms that air to, I think, 60 degrees before it enters the envelope. So that's a great point.
Okay. I would only make one other comment. You mentioned the advanced pace of the project, and Adam and I were kind of having a bit of a conversation last night. I would say I appreciate that everybody has managed to pull together, and I think that may be a great opportunity for all of you folks to understand that sometimes responding to an immediate need for our local economy can be a challenge, but hopefully there were some good lessons learned on this, and can carry that forward for new projects that might come up at the spur of the moment. So
Absolutely.
definitely good work so far.
Thank you.
Some
Good point.
missteps, which happens, I get it. You know, I'm a builder, I know. It's all good. That's it for me, thanks.
I didn't have any other questions. Commissioner Briscoe, did you have any?
No.
Hearing none, action item 3, all those in favor?
All right,
Aye.
Let the record show that passes 3-0. Would we like to tackle action item number 4, Commissioner?
how long is it gonna take, Cameron? 2 minutes, let's do it. I'd say yes.
Okay,
A motion to authorize the executive director to enter into an insurance contract and authorize payment for the renewal of the port's property and crime insurance coverage for the period from July 1, 2017 through July 1, 2018.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Tamara Sobjak, Director of Finance. This is the property and crime policy renewal that's in front of you today. It expires July 1st of every year. And the policy is pretty much the same as the one that is expiring, with one change. Staff is recommending the earthquake policy be increased from 25 million to 50 million. That increase is pretty inexpensive right now. It's $1,000 per million coverage. So it's only $25,000 increase in premium. That's really the only change that this policy is included.
You've been watching the History Channel? What's that all about?
Well, we have pretty large amount of property, almost $500 million in replacement value, so we need a little more coverage.
Most of our property is situated in areas where an earthquake could do some serious damage.
Okay, any questions?
Nope.
Commissioner Briscoe, any questions on the increase?
No, she's explained it quite well. Thank you.
Okay. Hearing none, all those in favor?
All right.
Aye.
Aye. Let the record show that passes 3-0. Do we want to tackle new business if you want this time, or you want to wait till 5:30? Wait till 5:30 on that. Okay, I agree. Okay, we are adjourned until 5:30.
you there? Commissioner Briscoe?
Hello.
Commissioner Briscoe, hello. All right.
Hello.
Hi.
Are we there?
Welcome. Yeah, we are. Here we are.
Okay,
Okay,
we'll
very good.
call the meeting back to order. New business. Commissioner Briscoe, any new business?
No, Commissioner Robbins, I have none. I'm still trying to finish up new business from the first year.
Commissioner McCauley.
I got a little bit. So at the last Whatcom County Government's, otherwise known as COG meeting, there was a conversation, a presentation, then a conversation about transportation as it relates to the state overall, and electric cars came up. And I recalled at the moment that Rob had mentioned to me something about a car park at the airport that could be an electric car charging station for car services. But that, and a week ago, somebody asked me if I would bring to the commission this concept of us putting in car charging stations at some of the port's facilities. So I wanted to bring that up with the commission, see if that might be something we start thinking about. Maybe not one or the other, or maybe both. And I read today that as of 2019, Volvo will no longer be making a car that's powered by gasoline alone. So I think the shift is clearly there, and it might be worthwhile for us to think about, just from a budgetary standpoint, what it means for the Port of Bellingham, and if there's any sort of infrastructure we might need to plan for or actually build in the next few years. So I wanted to bring that up with you folks. You still want to build a?
No, I think that's a great one, Commissioner. It's, the car park probably is a little premature. I think I was talking about, I think I've been drinking, was talking about the future really, but
Mine will do that, but that's okay.
we do have a need at almost all of our facilities for, a couple charging stations. There's more and more electrical cars. So I think the airport's probably a good start to get a couple in there. And what we can do, staff will come back to you with some recommendations about how these work and how much they cost and what the return is on them. And obviously you do charge for these. So we'll come back with some proposals.
And then
Agreed. I would recommend that maybe one on each one of our harbors, or two in Bellingham and Squalicum and one in Blaine as well.
Yeah, that sounds reasonable.
Yeah, cool. And the only other thing is after our first part of the meeting, I grabbed Shirley. I want to mention this to Bobby and Dan as well. So on the consent agenda, we had an item for the airport's, excuse me, the Hilton Hotel at the airport and the lease, and modifying some language in section 5.7.1. And it was, it seems that it might be a pretty good idea to look at all of our leases in the future and seeing if that language is relevant to all the future leases. So just wanted to share that with the folks here, and thank you for the clarification and the help with that, Shirley. I appreciate it. And that's my new business.
Okay, I have no new business, so hearing none unless you have anything.
I'm good.
We are adjourned.